The A7S Mark III is such a solid camera. Now, when Sony first released this, they let me borrow one for a little while, and I was able to shoot a mini documentary about regenerative farming using this camera, and it's on my channel. I'll link to it down below in the description. Before I switched to Sony, I was a big Panasonic user. I still have 4 GH5 bodies. I have all this other Micro Four Thirds camera gear. I have a Z Cam. I have like all this stuff around the Micro Four Thirds system, but this camera is the reason that I have switched fully from Panasonic. I'm selling all of that gear and I'm moving entirely to the Sony ecosystem. So I just got back from a massive trip. I drove up to Salt Lake City and did a 650-mile trek from Salt Lake City all the way to Tahoe on what's called the Pony Express. I shot the majority of it using this camera, and as I'm going through the footage, I thought now would be a great time to make this video. All right guys, so let's go through 10 reasons why you should get the A7S Mark III, or 10 reasons why I decided to switch to the A7S Mark III. So I know that this camera isn't the only camera that shoots 120 frames per second at 4K. However, it is one of the only in this size that's able to do 120 frames per second in 4K. But the beauty is, you're not only shooting slow motion, you also can get audio when you're recording 120 frames per second. So when I'm shooting my adventure films, when I'm shooting my documentary work, there's a lot of situations that I get in where I may want to use the audio from a scene. I may want to have it play out in real time, but I'm also want to capture this in slow motion. So having the ability to shoot 120 frames per second in 4K, I'm not losing any sort of quality when it comes to actually shooting these scenes, but then also I'm recording audio, so when I bring it into my editing software, I have that choice to be able to use it for real-time footage or slow motion footage. Reason number 2 is lens choice. So right now I have the 20mm 1.8. This is a solid choice for a lens. I'm shooting on 35mm 1.8. And one thing with Sony is there's an entire lens lineup, and you can choose whether you want faster lenses or you just want more functional lenses or smaller lenses. The beauty is the flange distance between the lens and the sensor is super small, so that means you don't have to have these massive lenses. And also with that, you can adapt all different styles of lenses to work on this camera body. So recently, I picked up a set of DZO film lenses. This is a bunch of Cine primes. I've got a whole bunch here. These are made for Canon EF mount. However, just using a simple mount, it's like $20 to get them. These work on the Sony. So I have the entire kit here, and this is actually what I shot a lot of my adventure film on the Pony Express with. I used this entire lineup of lenses, and these are special because they all have the same filter thread and they're all Cine primes, so everything is declicked. You have focus gears. I'm gonna do a separate follow-up video all about these lenses because these are special in their own way. But as you can see, this is the kind of footage that you can get using these lenses, and it just looks pretty amazing. So when it comes to a camera system, the lenses are super important, and I like the fact that you just have so many options with the Sony. Reason number 3 is the size and weight. So the Sony A7S Mark III is definitely bigger and thicker than some of their other cameras. However, it's still a tiny camera. I mean, this with a 20mm prime and the shotgun mic from Sony, this is basically what I carry around. It's super lightweight, and it's great for like a vlogging setup because of the flip out screen. Just like that, you have a solid vlogging camera. Now I'm shooting on the A7C here, which is kind of like my secondary camera I use for my office stuff. But just the size and weight of the Sony cameras is so small, and you can add whatever you want onto these cameras. So if you want to get faster primes from Sony, they are bigger and bulkier and heavier. However, if you go with the 1.8s, they're smaller, lighter, and you don't necessarily need to get a 1.4 or 1.2. You can get a 1.8 and still get a very good looking image. Not everything has to be shot with that super shallow depth of field. So having the option to have smaller and lighter lenses is one reason why I switched over to Sony. Reason number 4 is low light. This camera has 2 base ISOs, so in low light situations, you bump it up to 12,800 ISO, which is crazy to think about that you can shoot at 12,800 ISO and it becomes super clean, so there's little noise on the footage, and you can even boost it higher from there. So when we were out camping in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Utah, Nevada, I don't even know where we're at, I was shooting shots where the stars are twinkling in the distance and we're just lit by the campfire in front of us, and the footage looks amazing. I mean, the power that you can have with the low light capabilities of this camera is unmatched when you look at other camera systems. Like, back when I was doing a lot of travel filmmaking, this is the camera that I wish I had, because there were so many situations where you just have to use natural lighting. The fact that you can use 12,800 ISO and it's clean just puts this on a different level. It's a completely different animal, and you can shoot low light footage and not have to really worry about it, and not have to go back in the edit bay and be using noise filters and worrying about your colors getting messed up. Like, you're gonna be able to get what you want out of this camera shooting in low light. Number 5 is autofocus. So when I was using Panasonic, I pretty much had to shoot manual focus almost entirely because you can never trust the autofocus. Now with the A7S Mark III, there's different autofocus features, and it's really good about locking on your subject or locking on a face. There's just a lot of different tracking features that you can use with the autofocus, and you can make it work for the style of shooting that you like to do. So when I'm out shooting, like, I don't always rely on manual focus. I'll flip it over to auto, and I know that most of the time I'm gonna get the focus in shot. It's not always perfect. There's no autofocus that's completely perfect, but for the majority of what I've been shooting, when I shoot autofocus, I'm happy with the result. Now, you can also use autofocus in 120 frames per second. So no matter what frame rate you're shooting in, 120, 60, 24, 30, any of them, you're gonna get good autofocus results. So for me, that's kind of one of the big things about switching to Sony in general. Like here, I would have to be finagling with my focus to try and get perfect. I would usually put like a C-stand here with like my hat. I'd probably just set it here, lock the focus, and then I would go back over there. Now I just throw it on autofocus and it's good to go. So just coming from Panasonic cameras, that's been a huge upgrade for my workflow. Now number 6 is the color science. And originally, when I first started working with Sony cameras, I had the A6500, I had the A7S Mark II. I sold those cameras and I switched over to Panasonic fully. I actually really didn't like the color science that I was getting out of the old Sony cameras. And they've tweaked the color science, especially in the standard profile for their newer cameras. And out of camera, the standard look, I think looks pretty amazing. And I've found that I'm actually enjoying shooting standard more than shooting in one of the S-Log settings. So all the videos that I've been shooting with the A7S Mark III, I've shot completely in the standard mode. I know I'm not getting the full dynamic range that I can get out of the sensor, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter. You don't need to always get the full dynamic range to be able to get good looking footage. One thing that I've had to learn is just how to use the camera monitor to be able to get the best exposure. When I first started using this camera, I was exposing things too bright, but I started to learn the zebras, I started to learn some of the other features that you have in the camera, and I've been able to dial it in to find the best settings working in standard to where I can get an image pretty much looking how I want out of camera. It's made my workflow easier because I don't have to do any heavy color grading. I don't have to go through, change the log over into a Rec 709 and then do a heavy color grade on it. I can actually use most of the footage just straight out of camera. And for me, workflow is super important because I don't want to be spending weeks and weeks and weeks just going over footage and color grading. And I'd rather spend that time crafting the story. I'd rather put that effort into actually making the video enjoyable to watch rather than always color grading. So having Sony cameras now that have good color science just shooting in standard, it makes me worry less about the edit process, and I can focus more on the things that I want to focus on. Number 7 is Sony's lineup of cameras. So beyond the A7S Mark III being a solid choice, like I was saying, I also am shooting on the Sony A7C, and I also have the FX6 coming. And the reason is, I have a bunch of lenses now for Sony, and I can switch bodies depending on the situation that I'm in. So for my client work, I'm gonna be using the FX6 because it makes a lot more sense to use that body style for my client and commercial work. Whereas my YouTube work, I'm gonna be using the A7S Mark III, and like my adventure films, my documentary work, all of that's gonna be done on this camera because it's so small and lightweight. and the low light capabilities. Now, if I'm just shooting like a quick YouTube video, I'll probably switch over to the A7C because that camera is perfect for just run and gun vlog style or videos like this where I'm just talking directly to the camera. So having a camera system where I can switch out the bodies depending on what I'm shooting is much more appealing for my workflow. Number 8 is that Sony is focused on not just photos, but also video. So their hybrid cameras really do have video features in mind now. And when it comes to the lens lineup, you know, these new G Masters that are coming out, they have a declicked aperture, and that's much more of a video-centric tool. And just the way that they're built and the way that they're crafting these new lenses, they work for both photo and video. And if I am focused more on video and I really want to get like a servo lens, Sony has a whole line of servo lenses that make sense for video-specific styles of shooting. So I think the fact that Sony is focused on not just photos or not just videos, but they're kind of mixing their cameras to be used for both, gives it a big advantage over some of the other companies, because it's not just the camera bodies that need to be both photo and video, it's also the lens lineup. So if Panasonic, for example, they have the 10-25, which is a video lens that came out, but it kind of came out of nowhere and there's no other lens to support it. So they should have had like a 25-100 as well to be able to have like a full cinema lineup, but instead they put out this one lens and then all the others don't really match up. Like, it's kind of a weird disjointed system. And then you look at the full frame system and they really don't have any lenses at all. So I know that there's some of you out there that are saying like, well, Canon does all of this as well. Well, you have to kind of pick your camera system, and I'm gonna go with Sony because there's more features on the Sony side that appeal to me as a creator. Number 9 is the internal proxy workflow. So the beauty about working with the A7S Mark III is that I can set up proxies to record as I'm recording the main footage. So it basically records two files, the main clip, the high-res clip, and then a proxy, and you could set what that proxy is going to be. But it allows me to put the card in the computer, and then I can start working right away if I need to use a proxy workflow or transfer the footage over to an editor, and I don't have to wait for the footage to transcode to a smaller format. So number 10 is that Sony is creator focused, meaning that they actually are doing things to help creators, and they're actually listening to creators. And I think they're one of the only camera companies that's really taken this to another level. So I went to Camera Camp when, you know, we were able to still do big group meetups, and they sat us down and we had conversations about cameras with Sony representatives. Now, all of those conversations, we were talking about things that we liked, things that we didn't like about cameras, and then the next few cameras that came out, the ZV-1, the A7S Mark III, the A7C, they all incorporated the different things that we were asking for in cameras. For me, having a camera company that actually listens to the users is important because I know that they're gonna be asking us what we want from cameras moving forward, and we're actually gonna see those changes. So I know that Sony cameras aren't perfect. I know that this camera isn't perfect for everyone, but it has all the features that I need to be able to make the films that I want to make. When it comes down to finding the camera that you're gonna use, I highly suggest thinking through your workflow and the things that you need, and then find a camera that suits that, because there's so many options out there nowadays, and there's just so many good cameras on the market that you will be able to find the camera that works best for you. And if you have any questions about the A7S Mark III, or if you want to see any videos around my configurations of how I shoot and the settings that I use, let me know down in the comments. And next, I highly suggest you check out this video right here. This is the regenerative farm documentary that I did that's shot entirely using the Sony A7S Mark III, and it was shot all using the standard setting. So you can really see what you can get out of this camera in a run and gun docu adventure film style of video. All right, guys, I'll see you over there.